He paid the highest bid for the Apache woman, and no one imagined what happened next. White heavy check mark. People were beginning to gather near the auction hall, a place that had always been filled with whispers of wealth, power, and rare treasures. Today, however, something different hung in the air. A strange tension buzzed among the crowd, and curious glances were exchanged. Some people were here for the usual reasons: money, bragging rights, or the thrill of winning a rare artifact. But others seemed drawn by something they couldn't explain. They sensed that today's auction would not be ordinary. Inside the hall, rows of tables were neatly arranged with items of all kinds. There were rare trinkets, old weapons, handcrafted jewelry, and colorful blankets. Each piece had its own story, but it was clear to anyone who looked closely that some items had been taken from faraway lands, from people who had little choice in giving them away. Collectors and traders moved through the room, murmuring quietly to each other, inspecting the goods with sharp eyes and sharper minds. Among them, a man of wealth and quiet presence walked slowly, taking everything in. He was different from the others. He did not rush. He did not whisper or bargain with the intensity of the others. His eyes, calm yet sharp, moved across the items with careful consideration. Then something caught his attention. A small group had gathered near the far end of the hall, where the most unusual item of the day was being presented. It was not a vase or a necklace, not even a sword that had seen great battles. It was a young Apache woman, sitting quietly on a wooden platform, her eyes steady and proud despite the strange situation she found herself in. She wore simple clothing, and her long hair fell over her shoulders. She did not cry, did not beg, and did not show fear. Yet the whispers among the crowd revealed the injustice she faced. Some people called her exotic, some called her a curiosity. Others murmured about who might pay the most to own her presence, as if she were a thing rather than a human being with feelings, thoughts, and a life of her own. The collector felt a deep unease in his chest. He had seen auctions before, but he had never seen something so wrong. He could not understand how people could treat another human being as if she were an object. The more he watched, the more he realized that this young woman was not only brave but also dignified. Her calmness in the face of such humiliation gave him a strange mix of admiration and sorrow. He wanted to do something, but he knew he had to act carefully. The auctioneer, a loud and confident man, began to speak, calling out bids with excitement. Who will start the bidding? Who will take her home for the highest offer? The crowd erupted into murmurs and speculation. People raised their hands, shouting amounts that grew higher and higher. The tension in the room thickened, and it seemed as though no one paused to think about the consequences of what was happening. Everyone wanted to win, to feel powerful, to show off their wealth. Yet the collector remained silent at first, observing. He watched the young woman's eyes, which met his briefly. There was a spark of understanding, as if she recognized that he was not like the others. In that moment, he knew he could not let this injustice continue. When it was his turn, he stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but firm. "I will pay," he said. The room fell silent for a moment and then erupted into surprise and whispers. The other bidders could not believe it. "Why would he do that?" they murmured. "Does he know what he is doing?" Some thought he might be foolish, while others were angry, thinking he had stolen their chance to win. But the collector did not answer. He simply continued bidding, raising the amount until he reached the highest offer anyone could imagine. The young woman watched silently, her eyes never leaving him. She did not know what to expect, but there was something in his gaze that gave her a sense of hope. When the auctioneer finally called, "Sold," the room erupted into applause and murmurs. People were shocked, some with envy, some with disbelief. Yet the collector did not smile or boast. He stepped forward and helped the young woman down from the platform, not as an owner, but as someone who wanted to ensure she was safe. He whispered a few words to her, and although she did not reply, her eyes softened, showing the first sign of trust. Outside, the sun was higher in the sky, warming the wooden streets and the dusty ground. The crowd slowly dispersed, still talking about the auction and the unexpected turn of events. Many could not understand why someone would pay so much for what they saw as nothing more than a prize, yet the collector did not care about their opinions. He was focused on the young woman, on the fact that she was free from the immediate danger, and that he could help her start a new chapter in her life. As they walked together through the streets, people stared. Some whispered, some shook their heads, and some smiled quietly, recognizing the kindness in his actions. The young woman remained quiet, observing everything with a careful eye. She had been through hardship and fear, and yet she still held her dignity and strength. The collector sensed that she had stories to tell, knowledge to share, and a spirit that would not be broken. He wondered how someone so young could carry such resilience and wisdom. Once they reached his home, he offered her food, water, and a place to rest. She accepted silently, though her eyes remained cautious. The collector understood that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. Over the next hours, he observed her quietly, learning from her expressions, her gestures, and her moments of silence. He realized that this was not just a story about an auction or a high bid. This was about respect, humanity, and the possibility of friendship across worlds that had been divided by misunderstanding and fear. As evening fell, the collector sat by the window, looking out at the quiet streets, thinking about what had happened. The auction had ended, but the real story was just beginning. He did not know what the future held, nor did he know how the young woman would respond to this new life. Yet he felt a deep sense of purpose and responsibility. He understood that his actions had consequences, and that protecting her was not just about money or power. It was about doing what was right. Inside, the young woman slowly explored her new surroundings. She touched the furniture carefully, examined the walls, and watched the sunlight as it filtered through the windows. She did not speak much, but her eyes showed curiosity, intelligence, and cautious hope. She had been through a world where people often misunderstood her, underestimated her, or tried to control her. Here, she felt something new, a chance to be seen as a person, not an object. That night, as the town slept under the soft glow of the moon, both the collector and the young woman reflected on the day. One thought about courage and justice, the other about trust and survival. Neither knew exactly what lay ahead, but both felt that a connection had been made that could not be broken easily. It was the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would challenge both of them, teach them lessons about life, and eventually change the lives of many others around them. In the quiet moments before sleep, the collector realized that paying the highest bid had not been about winning an auction. It had been about choosing to act with integrity when others had chosen greed. And the young woman, though she remained silent, felt a glimmer of something she had not felt in a long time: hope. A story that had begun with a price tag had suddenly become a story about courage, humanity, and the unexpected power of respect. After that long, quiet night, the morning brought a sense of calm and curiosity. The sun shone gently through the windows, illuminating the room where the young Apache woman was slowly waking up. She moved carefully, noticing every detail of the house. Unlike the small, crowded dwelling she had known before, this place was large and filled with objects she had never seen. There were paintings on the walls, shelves stacked with books, and furniture that gleamed in the morning light. She touched the edges of a table, examining the smooth wood, and then glanced around, unsure of what to make of it. Her eyes were cautious, reflecting both curiosity and wariness. The collector watched quietly from across the room. He had seen her move, her gentle touch on the unfamiliar objects, and he realized how different their worlds were. He had spent his life among wealth, possessions, and carefully controlled surroundings, yet here he was learning humility. He understood that the woman's life had been filled with struggle, danger, and lessons that no money could ever buy. He wanted to create a safe space for her, but he also knew that safety alone would not earn her trust. Trust had to grow naturally, like a seed nurtured by patience, understanding, and respect. He offered her breakfast, setting down a plate with simple food. She examined it, unsure of what to do, but hunger finally overcame caution, and she ate slowly. She did not speak much, and when she did, her words were careful, measured, as though choosing each one for its exact meaning. The collector did not rush her. He spoke gently, asking about her journey, about her experiences, but only if she wanted to share. At first, her answers were short, almost like echoes of memories she did not wish to fully reveal. Yet the collector noticed a glimmer of connection in her eyes, a recognition that he was different from those who had treated her as less than human. The first days were filled with quiet observation. The woman watched the routines of the house, learning its rhythms, and the collector observed her, noting her intelligence, her patience, and the way she moved through the space as if she belonged nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It became clear that she was not simply reacting to her surroundings. She was analyzing them, understanding their function, and adapting to them in ways that surprised him. He found himself admiring her ability to remain calm and dignified despite the hardships she had endured. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, the collector spoke gently. "I know this must be strange for you. I cannot imagine what it feels like to be taken from your home, to be treated like an object." The woman looked at him, her eyes steady, and replied softly, "I have faced many things. I know fear, I know pain, but I also know strength. And I do not give it easily to anyone." Her voice was calm, but there was power in it. The collector felt a shiver of respect. This was no ordinary person. This was someone who had survived hardships that he could not begin to imagine, yet she carried herself with dignity, wisdom, and courage. As days passed, small routines began to form. The woman helped around the house, though not out of obligation. She taught him about simple ways to care for the garden, how to notice the patterns in the wind and the sun, and even small things about plants and nature that he had never paid attention to. He began to see her knowledge as extraordinary, not because it was exotic, but because it came from years of living with awareness, of surviving in a world that demanded resilience. He started listening more, not as a teacher or owner, but as a student. The collector also learned to respect silence. In moments when words were not spoken, he could sense her thoughts, her reflections, and her understanding of him. It was a strange but comforting rhythm, this silent communication that required no language, only attention and empathy. Slowly, he began to feel a friendship forming, a delicate, fragile thread that could grow stronger if nurtured with patience. Their bond deepened one day when she shared a story from her past. They sat in the garden, the sunlight casting shadows over the flowers, and she spoke of her family, of her people, and of the lessons she had learned from them. She spoke of courage in the face of danger, of patience when nothing seemed certain, and of respect for the land and its creatures. The collector listened intently, realizing that her stories were not only personal, but also full of wisdom that could teach him more than any book ever could. He felt a growing admiration and a desire to honor her knowledge. At the same time, not everyone in town was pleased with what had happened. Rumors spread quickly about the collector and the Apache woman, and some whispered that he had made a foolish choice, that he had been blinded by curiosity, or worse, that he had taken advantage of her. The whispers were filled with misunderstanding and judgment. The collector did not respond to them, but he noticed the woman's awareness of the gossip. She did not let it disturb her outwardly, but he saw her eyes flicker with the same caution he had seen in the auction hall. He understood that their connection, though growing stronger, existed in a world full of misunderstanding and prejudice. To bridge that gap, he began inviting her to learn about his life and habits, not to impress her, but to create mutual understanding. He showed her the books he cherished, the maps he studied, and the places he had traveled. She listened quietly, occasionally asking questions that surprised him with their insight. Her curiosity was not idle, it was sharp, thoughtful, and intentional. She asked about his choices, his mistakes, and his understanding of fairness. And in return, he shared honestly, revealing a vulnerability that few people ever saw. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, the woman stood at the window, looking out. The collector joined her silently. After a while, she spoke softly, almost as if to herself. "I have lived in many worlds, but few are like this. Here, I feel something I cannot name." He nodded, understanding her words more deeply than she realized. Trust, he thought, was growing slowly but steadily. It could not be forced, and it could not be rushed. They were learning to walk beside each other in mutual respect, each recognizing the value of the other's presence. Their friendship was not without challenges. Sometimes misunderstandings arose. She would retreat into silence when reminded of past pain, and he would struggle to respond in ways that were sensitive enough yet honest. Yet every challenge became a lesson, a moment that strengthened their bond. The collector realized that the real work of friendship was not in grand gestures or words, but in patience, listening, and the willingness to learn from someone completely different from oneself. One day, while walking in the nearby woods, she pointed out small signs of nature, the tracks of animals, the patterns of plants, and the subtle changes in the wind and the light. She explained how her people had used these signs to survive and thrive. The collector marveled at her knowledge, realizing that it was not just survival skills but a deep understanding of life itself. He felt humbled, aware that no amount of wealth or study could ever replace the wisdom gained from living fully and attentively in the world. Evenings became a time of quiet reflection. They would sit by the fireplace, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories. Occasionally, she would speak of lessons learned from her elders, or of traditions that honored the land and the people who lived in harmony with it. The collector listened, absorbing every word, every lesson. He realized that he was learning more than he could have imagined, not from books or teachers, but from this extraordinary young woman who had endured hardship with courage and grace. Slowly, the town began to notice the change in both of them. The collector, once distant and focused on possessions, now spoke more of fairness, respect, and understanding. The woman, once cautious and wary, began to show moments of warmth, laughter, and trust. Their friendship was no longer a secret. It was becoming a quiet legend in the town, though few understood its depth. People continued to whisper, but the collector and the woman moved through the world together, guided not by wealth, fear, or judgment, but by mutual respect, patience, and the shared knowledge that they had found something rare, friendship built on understanding, not possession. As days turned into weeks, the young Apache woman and the collector continued to learn from each other. They shared meals, stories, and moments of silence. They explored the garden, the nearby woods, and even the town, each experience teaching them more about the other. The woman's courage and wisdom inspired the collector to see the world differently, and his kindness and respect encouraged her to trust again. What had begun as a moment of injustice, the auction, was now transforming into a story of human connection, resilience, and the surprising power of understanding. By the end of that part of their journey, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening. Two people from completely different worlds, brought together by chance and circumstance, were forming a bond that neither money nor prejudice could destroy. Trust was growing slowly, carefully, like a young plant reaching toward the sun. And both of them sensed, even without words, that this friendship was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge them, teach them, and eventually show the town, and perhaps the world, that respect and humanity were more valuable than any treasure that could be bought. As the days passed, the bond between the collector and the young Apache woman grew stronger. They had developed a rhythm of shared respect, quiet companionship, and small lessons that enriched both their lives. Yet there remained a depth within her that had not yet been fully revealed. She had survived hardships that he could not begin to imagine, and she carried knowledge that extended far beyond the walls of his house or the borders of the town. One afternoon, while the sun was high and the garden glowed with color, she beckoned him to follow her to the edge of the woods behind the house. He hesitated for a moment, aware that this was her space, her decision to share. She walked confidently, moving with a grace that came from years of living in tune with the land. The collector followed, curious and cautious, knowing that this journey would offer more than a simple walk. They reached a small clearing surrounded by tall trees and wildflowers. The air was different here, quieter, yet alive with the subtle hum of nature. She knelt by a patch of soil and motioned for him to join her. He crouched carefully, observing her actions. With deliberate care, she began to show him how to read the land, how to notice the signs left by animals, how to understand the wind, the sun, and the patterns of the plants. Every movement had meaning, every glance carried knowledge. The collector realized that this was not merely a lesson about survival, it was a lesson about life, awareness, and connection to the world around them. She spoke softly, her voice carrying authority without arrogance. "This land speaks," she said. "If you know how to listen, it will tell you many things. It will tell you where water is, where danger lies, where food grows. But most people do not listen. They rush, they take, they ignore." The collector listened carefully, absorbing every word. He realized that her knowledge was not just practical, it was philosophical, a way of seeing and understanding life that was rare and valuable. He felt privileged to learn from her, yet he also felt a deep responsibility. This knowledge was precious, and it was being entrusted to him, not for profit but for understanding. As the sun moved across the sky, she continued to reveal small secrets of her people's ways. She spoke of herbs with healing powers, of techniques to track animals silently, and of the signs of changing weather that could protect a traveler from danger. Each lesson was carefully explained, each demonstration filled with precision and thought. The collector, who had spent much of his life acquiring wealth and possessions, was astonished by the depth and relevance of what she shared. He realized that true value was not measured in gold or silver, but in understanding, skill, and wisdom. At one point she paused and looked at him directly. "You have listened carefully," she said. "Few people would do that. Many would only look and not see, hear and not understand. But you have patience. You have respect. That is why I am showing you this." He felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. He had thought he was helping her, but in truth, she was teaching him lessons that he could not have learned from any book or teacher. He understood that their relationship had transformed from one of protection to one of mutual growth. Later, back at the house, she began to share stories of her people's history and traditions. These were not tales of adventure or entertainment. They were lessons in morality, courage, and resilience. She spoke of leaders who had guided their people wisely, of families who had survived through unity and trust, and of the importance of respecting the land and all its creatures. The collector listened in awe, realizing that he was absorbing a wisdom that could not be bought or stolen. It was a gift, freely given, and he felt the weight of responsibility to honor it. As their conversations grew deeper, the town outside began to notice subtle changes. The whispers about the auction persisted, but fewer people spoke of greed or foolishness, and more began to wonder about the connection between the collector and the Apache woman. Some could sense that there was something extraordinary in their interactions, though few understood the depth of trust, learning, and respect that had developed. People began to watch quietly, curious but hesitant, sensing that this was not an ordinary friendship. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, she confided in him something she had never shared with anyone before. "There are secrets," she said softly, "things my people have learned over generations. Knowledge that is not just about survival, but about understanding the world and living in harmony with it. Few outsiders are allowed to know this, and fewer still are trusted to use it wisely." The collector felt a shiver run through him. This was not merely a lesson in skills, it was a trust, a test of character, and an acknowledgement of his integrity. He nodded quietly, understanding the seriousness of what she was sharing. Over the next days, she guided him through small exercises to understand her knowledge more deeply. He learned to identify plants not just by appearance, but by smell, texture, and subtle cues that revealed their properties. He learned to move silently through the woods, to observe without disturbing, to notice patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. Each lesson required patience, concentration, and respect. He struggled at times, but she was patient, offering guidance without criticism, encouraging him to observe, learn, and adapt. Their friendship began to influence their daily lives in other ways. The collector, once focused on his possessions and social standing, now spent hours learning from her, exploring nature and contemplating life through a new lens. He found joy in small things: a bird landing on a branch, the sound of wind through the trees, the rhythm of the seasons. The woman, in turn, began to trust him more openly, sharing stories, laughter, and even small jokes that revealed her personality. The walls between them, built by fear, history, and misunderstanding, were slowly crumbling, replaced by respect, trust, and genuine connection. Yet the growing bond did not go unnoticed. Some people in the town began to question the collector's intentions, believing that he might exploit the woman's knowledge or that their friendship was improper. Rumors spread, though they were fueled more by envy and ignorance than fact. The collector ignored them, but he noticed the woman's eyes occasionally flicker with concern. He reassured her silently, through small gestures of kindness, patience, and attention, showing that their connection was genuine and safe. One afternoon, as they walked along the riverbank, she paused and said, "Knowledge is a gift, but it is also responsibility. You must use it wisely, with care and respect, or it can harm as much as it helps." The collector nodded thoughtfully. He realized that what he had learned from her was not just practical skill, but moral guidance. He felt a deep respect for her wisdom and a commitment to honor it in everything he did. Their conversations, once simple exchanges, had become profound lessons about life, ethics, and understanding. As the weeks turned into months, the collector and the young woman continued to explore and learn together. She showed him the hidden paths through the woods, the signs of changing weather, and the subtle ways animals communicated. He realized that her knowledge was a bridge to a world he had never known, a world of observation, patience, and harmony with nature. In turn, he shared his own experiences, stories of the places he had visited, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. They began to see that, though their worlds were different, there were common threads, values of courage, respect, and integrity that could unite them. The turning point came one evening when she revealed a secret of great significance, a hidden grove where rare herbs grew, known only to her people. These herbs had healing properties, some of which were unknown to the local healers. The collector was amazed, realizing that this knowledge could change lives, not for profit but for the good of others. He promised her that he would never exploit this secret, and she, in turn, allowed him to accompany her to the grove, teaching him the careful ways of harvesting, using, and preserving the herbs. By now, their friendship had become a quiet legend. People in the town began to notice the changes in both of them, the collector's increasing humility and thoughtfulness, and the woman's growing openness and trust. Rumors persisted, but the truth was clear to those who looked closely. This was not a story of possession or exploitation, but of mutual respect, learning, and the extraordinary connection that can form when two people see each other as equals. As night fell and the stars appeared, they sat together outside the house, reflecting on all they had shared. The collector understood that he had been given a gift far greater than any artifact or treasure, the wisdom, courage, and trust of a remarkable human being. And the young woman, though cautious and strong, felt that she had found someone who truly respected her knowledge, her experience, and her dignity. Their journey, which had begun with an auction and a shocking highest bid, had transformed into a story of friendship, learning, and the power of trust. And yet, both knew that challenges were still ahead. The knowledge she had shared, and the bond they had formed, could provoke envy, greed, and misunderstanding in the world outside their sanctuary. But for now, they reveled in the rare and precious connection they had discovered, a connection that would continue to grow, to teach, and to change both their lives in ways no one could have imagined. Life had begun to settle into a rhythm, but the world outside their small sanctuary was not as peaceful. News of the collector's unusual actions and his friendship with the Apache woman had spread through the town, and not everyone viewed it kindly. Some people whispered that the woman possessed secret knowledge, and that the collector had somehow gained access to it. Others believed that she should not be there at all, and some greedy individuals began to wonder how they could exploit the situation for their own advantage. The collector was aware of the growing tension. Though he had tried to ignore the gossip and judgment, he could not pretend that danger did not exist. He had paid the highest bid at the auction, yes, but that act had marked him as different in the eyes of many, and it had also marked the young woman as someone of interest, someone rare, someone valuable to those who thought only of profit or power. He knew that they had to be careful, yet he refused to live in fear. Protecting her meant understanding the threats, facing them calmly, and acting with courage and intelligence. One morning, a group of men arrived in town. They were traders and collectors, men who had attended the auction and lost the bid. They carried themselves with arrogance, their eyes scanning the streets as though they were hunting. The collector noticed them immediately and understood their purpose. They had come to claim what they believed was theirs, to take advantage of the situation. They had no respect for the young woman's dignity, no concern for her safety. They only saw opportunity. The young woman sensed their presence as well. Her instincts were sharp. She had survived dangers that few could imagine. She studied their movements silently, noting their approach, the way they spoke, and the signs of their intentions. She turned to the collector and spoke in a low voice. "They are here. They do not understand respect. They do not see people as people. They only see what they want to take." He nodded, his mind already planning. He knew that confrontation was inevitable, but he also knew that violence was not always the answer. They would need strategy, cleverness, and courage to protect themselves. The first encounter was tense. The men approached the collector's home, demanding to see the woman and asserting that she belonged to the highest bidder. The collector stood firm, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with their aggression. "She does not belong to anyone," he said, "and I will not allow harm to come to her." The young woman stood beside him, her eyes steady, showing a quiet strength that surprised the intruders. She did not speak loudly, did not threaten, yet her presence alone was commanding. The men hesitated, realizing that this was not a simple matter of payment or ownership. Over the next several days, the threats continued. The men tried to intimidate the collector and the young woman, sending messages and making veiled threats. The collector responded with patience and strategy, never escalating the situation unnecessarily. He observed the men, learned their habits, and worked with the woman to anticipate their moves. The young woman's knowledge of tracking, observation, and survival became invaluable. She could predict the movements of those who sought to exploit her, guiding the collector in ways that kept them both safe. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the men tried to force their way onto the property. The collector and the young woman had prepared carefully. Using a combination of clever tactics and her knowledge of the land, they led the men into situations that revealed their weaknesses. They avoided direct confrontation, instead using strategy to outsmart their pursuers. The collector marveled at her intelligence and resourcefulness, realizing that she had survived for so long not just because of strength, but because of her ability to think, plan, and adapt. The town watched with a mix of curiosity and awe. People had expected the collector to be overpowered, the woman to be taken, and yet the opposite had happened. They were learning that respect, intelligence, and courage could overcome aggression and greed. The young woman's calm confidence inspired the collector, and he, in turn, provided the steady support she needed to act effectively. Together, they were a team, each complementing the other in ways that neither could have imagined. During one particularly tense day, the collector realized that the men had brought outsiders to help them, people who were unfamiliar with the land and the clever ways of the young woman. She studied them carefully, noting their mistakes, their lack of patience, and their eagerness to act before thinking. She whispered to the collector, guiding him through a plan that would ensure their safety without causing harm. They executed it perfectly, leading the intruders into a trap of their own making. The men were embarrassed, frustrated, and finally left, realizing that this situation was not as simple as they had thought. The experience strengthened their bond. The young woman could see that the collector was willing to act with courage and intelligence, just as she had. He could see that she possessed a wisdom and resilience that went far beyond what he had imagined. Together, they realized that they could face any challenge if they remained united, if they trusted each other, and if they continued to act with respect, patience, and careful planning. Yet the challenges were not only external. The collector and the young woman faced internal struggles as well. Trust, though growing, was still delicate. Each had to balance courage with caution, openness with discretion. They argued at times, not with anger, but with the careful negotiation of boundaries and understanding. She reminded him that knowledge was precious and had to be used wisely. He reminded her that compassion and patience could be as powerful as any skill or lesson she had taught him. These internal struggles only strengthened their connection, teaching them that true partnership required honesty, humility, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as the sky turned golden with the approaching sunset, the young woman led the collector to a hidden area in the woods. She revealed a natural spring, its water clear and pure, hidden from anyone who did not know the land. "This is a place of safety," she said. "Here we can rest, think, and plan." Few people know of it and fewer still respect it. The collector nodded, understanding that this sanctuary was more than water. It was a symbol of trust, wisdom, and survival. He realized that he had been given a privilege, not a possession, and he vowed silently to honor it. Days turned into weeks, and the external threats gradually diminished, largely because the intruders had learned that they could not intimidate or outsmart the pair. The town began to see a change in both of them. The collector, once distant and self-absorbed, now acted with fairness, integrity, and courage. The young woman, once cautious and guarded, now displayed a quiet confidence, knowing that she had an ally who truly respected her. Their story became a quiet legend, a tale of courage, intelligence, and the power of partnership that went beyond wealth, ownership, or social expectation. Yet they knew that vigilance was necessary. The world outside was not always fair, and there would always be those who sought to exploit, deceive, or harm. The collector and the young woman continued to plan, to observe, and to prepare, always learning from each other, always respecting the knowledge, courage, and humanity that each brought to the relationship. They realized that true strength was not in possession or aggression, but in understanding, trust, and the careful use of wisdom. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, they sat together in the hidden grove, reflecting on the challenges they had faced. "We have faced many tests," the collector said quietly, "and yet together we have overcome them. I could not have done this without you." She nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. "And I could not have done it without you. You have shown patience, respect, and courage. That is why we have succeeded." They understood in that quiet moment that their bond was no longer fragile. It had been tempered by experience, strengthened by challenges, and built on trust and mutual respect. The town, meanwhile, continued to watch. Rumors persisted, yet fewer people spoke of greed or envy. More began to notice the strength and dignity of both the collector and the young woman, recognizing that their story was something rare, something extraordinary. Their actions had demonstrated that respect, intelligence, and courage could overcome threats and misunderstandings. It was a story that inspired quiet admiration and reflection, a story of human connection in a world that often failed to recognize its value. By the end of this part of their journey, the collector and the young woman had grown into a formidable team. External threats had been faced and overcome, internal trust had deepened, and both had learned lessons about courage, patience, and the importance of mutual respect. They were not only surviving, they were thriving, their bond becoming stronger with each passing day. They knew that the challenges of the world were not gone, but they had proven to themselves and to others that intelligence, strategy, and respect could overcome greed, ignorance, and fear. The stage was now set for the next chapter of their journey. With trust established, knowledge shared, and courage tested, they were ready for what lay ahead. Their story was no longer just about an auction or a high bid. It had become a tale of friendship, resilience, and the extraordinary power of human connection, one that would continue to shape their lives and the lives of those around them in ways no one could have imagined. Days grew calmer, but the experiences of the past weeks had changed both the collector and the young Apache woman forever. The trials they had faced, the auction, the whispers, the threats, and the constant need for vigilance, had not weakened them. Instead, they had forged a bond that was deep, unshakable, and built on mutual respect. Each had learned from the other. The collector had learned patience, humility, and the value of knowledge beyond money, while the young woman had learned that trust could exist even in a world that had often treated her with fear and suspicion. As the sun rose over the town one morning, the collector and the young woman walked together through the garden, now vibrant with flowers she had helped plant. The air was filled with the scent of earth, blossoms, and the faint aroma of herbs. It was a peaceful moment, a rare pause in the whirlwind of challenges they had faced. Yet both of them knew that this was more than a simple day. It was a reflection of the life they had built together, a life shaped by courage, wisdom, and respect. The young woman spoke first, her voice calm but filled with meaning. "We have faced much," she said, "but the world is still full of people who do not understand. Some will try to take what they do not earn, to use knowledge and power for selfish gain. We must continue to act with care, to teach by example, and to protect what is valuable, not just for ourselves but for others." The collector nodded thoughtfully. He had seen the dangers, felt the threats, and understood the weight of her words. He realized that their journey had not been just about survival. It had been about building a legacy, one that could inspire others to act with integrity, courage, and respect. Over the following weeks, they began to share the knowledge she possessed with the town, carefully and wisely. Not everyone was allowed to learn the secrets of the land, the herbs, and the lessons of resilience, but those who did were chosen for their character, their respect, and their willingness to understand. Slowly, the community began to change. People who had once been driven by greed and judgment started to notice the value of patience, observation, and respect for others. They saw the bond between the collector and the young woman and recognized something rare, a partnership based not on power or possession, but on trust, learning, and mutual support. The young woman continued to teach, but she also listened. She asked questions, observed behaviors, and encouraged understanding. Her presence became a guiding light for those willing to learn. And the collector, who had once focused primarily on wealth and status, now focused on using his influence to promote fairness, respect, and education. Together, they became more than friends. They became a force for good, a quiet example that inspired admiration and change in the people around them. One day, as they sat by the riverbank reflecting on the journey they had shared, the collector asked, "Do you ever regret trusting me?" The young woman smiled faintly, her eyes steady and thoughtful. "No," she said. "Trust is not given lightly, but it is worth it when it finds a heart that is sincere. You have shown patience, courage, and respect. That is why we have come this far, and why we will continue to move forward together." The collector felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that the greatest lesson of all was not about knowledge, survival, or even courage. It was about the power of trust and human connection. The town, over time, began to tell stories of their journey. Children would listen in awe as elders spoke of the collector and the Apache woman, of how they had faced danger, overcome challenges, and built a life based on respect, understanding, and shared wisdom. People learned that true strength was not measured by wealth, size, or power, but by the ability to act with integrity, to listen carefully, and to honor the value of others. The legend of their friendship spread quietly, influencing hearts and minds in ways that could not be measured. Meanwhile, the young woman continued to nurture her own growth. She began to engage with the world in ways she had never imagined. She learned to navigate the complexities of town life, balancing her independence with the need for trust, and sharing her knowledge only with those who were willing to learn and respect it. The collector continued to support her, not as a master or protector, but as a partner and a student of her wisdom. Their relationship was no longer defined by circumstance. It was defined by choice, understanding, and mutual admiration. One afternoon, they decided to plant a small grove of trees near the edge of the property. Each tree was chosen carefully, each planted with intention and care. The young woman explained that the trees represented resilience, growth, and the importance of leaving something lasting for future generations. As they worked together, the collector realized that this act, simple as it seemed, symbolized everything they had learned and shared: patience, respect, wisdom, and hope. Each tree was a living testament to their journey and a gift to the world that would endure long after they were gone. Evenings became moments of reflection and planning. They would sit by the fire, sharing stories of the past, lessons of the present, and hopes for the future. Sometimes the conversation was quiet, filled with the soft crackle of flames and the occasional chirping of crickets. Other times, they spoke passionately about what they had learned and how it could help others. Their shared knowledge became a bridge between worlds, a connection that brought understanding, inspiration, and hope to those around them. Challenges still arose, though they were no longer threats of immediate danger. Instead, they were challenges of understanding, patience, and communication. Sometimes townspeople questioned their methods or intentions. Other times, the young woman struggled with the memories of hardship and mistrust that lingered within her. The collector responded with patience and empathy, never pushing, always listening, always learning alongside her. Through these small trials, their friendship and partnership deepened, becoming a model of collaboration, respect, and shared purpose. In time, their story became one of legacy. The knowledge she shared was carefully preserved, taught only to those who were ready to understand its value. The collector used his influence to ensure that the lessons of respect, patience, and courage reached beyond their small town. Together, they had transformed what began as an act of injustice, the auction, into a story of hope, resilience, and inspiration. Their lives, once shaped by fear and misunderstanding, had become a beacon of what was possible when humans acted with integrity, compassion, and trust. One evening, as the stars twinkled above, they sat quietly in the hidden grove they had planted. The young woman spoke softly. "We have faced many things, yet here we are. What we have built is more than friendship. It is a promise. A promise to respect, to protect, and to teach." The collector nodded, feeling the weight and beauty of her words. "And that promise," he said, "will continue not just between us but through those we share it with. It is our legacy." As they looked at the grove, the trees stretching toward the sky, they felt a sense of fulfillment and peace. They had survived danger, overcome threats, and nurtured a bond that was stronger than fear, greed, or misunderstanding. They had learned that true courage was not about confrontation alone, but about integrity, trust, and the quiet strength to act rightly when others would not. Their story had begun with a shocking act at an auction, but it had evolved into something far greater, a testament to humanity, wisdom, and the power of connection. In the years that followed, the town remembered their story. Children learned of the collector and the Apache woman, not as a tale of ownership or wealth, but as a story of respect, courage, and the importance of seeing people as equals. Their lessons lived on in the community, lessons of patience, understanding, and the careful nurturing of knowledge. People who had once whispered in judgment now spoke in admiration, realizing that what had begun with a high bid had become a story of life, trust, and the extraordinary power of friendship. The collector and the young woman continued to walk their path together, learning, teaching, and inspiring. Their bond was no longer fragile or tentative. It was a living testament to resilience, respect, and hope. What had started with a moment of injustice had transformed into a story of triumph, humanity, and enduring legacy. They had shown the world that courage, wisdom, and integrity could overcome adversity, and that the greatest treasures in life are not gold or silver, but trust, friendship, and the knowledge that we can make a difference simply by acting with respect and understanding. And so, the tale of the collector and the Apache woman came to be remembered, not for the auction or the high bid, but for the lessons they shared, the challenges they overcame, and the remarkable legacy they left behind. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that even in the face of misunderstanding and greed, compassion, patience, and wisdom could prevail, leaving a mark on the world that time could never erase.